There is this hiking trail that me and my friends used to go to in the summer. It wasn't a public trail, just this old path we found when we were kids, out behind the town cemetery. The woods around it were dense, and no one really went out there except the occasional hiker, which was kind of the appeal. We'd go out there to get away from everyone, build a fire, tell stories, just hang out. It was our spot, and we never had any problems with it before. That night, though, it was just me and my buddy Rob. The others bailed last minute, but we didn't want to waste the night. It was cool for a summer's night, perfect weather for a fire, so we decided to go ahead without them. We hiked in around dusk, found our usual clearing, and set up camp. We built a fire, sat around talking, and just soaked in the quiet of the woods. After a couple hours, everything seemed great. We were laughing and having a good time. The night continued as normal until around 10 p.m. when a strange noise broke the conversation. At first, it sounded like loud footsteps coming from somewhere just beyond the firelight. I called out, thinking maybe it was a lost hiker or something, but the footsteps stopped immediately. We both scanned the darkness, but there was nothing. The woods were too thick to see past the first row of trees, and the firelight only reached so far. After a while, we tried to go back to our conversation, but every few minutes, we'd hear it again. The sounds of footsteps, sometimes from behind us, sometimes off to the side. It was never close enough for us to see anything, but always close enough to keep us on edge. It felt like something was circling us, getting just close enough to let us know it was there, but never showing itself. Rob finally spoke up and said, "You feel like we're not alone out here?" I nodded slightly, trying to keep it cool, but yeah, I felt it. I suggested we pack it in, head back to town. It was already late, and the whole thing was starting to feel wrong, and Rob agreed, so we started packing up, throwing dirt on the fire, but just as we were getting ready to leave, the noise stopped completely. No footsteps or rustling. We stood there for a moment, just listening. The fire was out, and it was pitch black, except for the beam of our flashlights. That's when Rob whispered, "Look over there." I turned to where he was pointing, and there, just beyond the tree line, was something standing in the shadows. It was taller than any person I'd ever seen, with long, bony limbs. At first, I thought it was something reflecting a weird shadow, like a tree. But then it moved. It took a step forward just into the edge of the light. It had this twisted, contorted face, like something out of a nightmare, with deep eyes and a gaping mouth that seemed too wide. But it wasn't the face that scared me the most. It was the way it moved. Not like an animal or a person, but more like its joints didn't bend the right way. It was unnatural and disturbing to look at. I tried to process what we were seeing, but we both just froze, barely breathing, and this thing just kept moving toward us, slow and steady. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Rob suddenly sprung into action and grabbed my arm, yanking me, and that's when we broke into a sprint. We didn't stop running. I could hear something moving through the woods behind us, like it was chasing us down. And because the woods were so thick, we kept stumbling, tripping over roots and branches, but we didn't dare look back. I could feel this overwhelming sense of dread, like it was closing in. As we neared the edge of the woods, right where the cemetery begins, Rob tripped. I stopped to help him up, but when I looked back, the demonic-looking thing was there, crouched low, its limbs all twisted up, reaching out for him. I noticed it seemed to be licking its lips like it was hungry. With fear and adrenaline pumping, I grabbed Rob and pulled him to his feet, and we ran the last stretch out of the woods, not stopping until we were well into town. We spent the rest of the night talking about what happened, and at some point, thought about reporting it. But who would believe something like that? Neither of us went back to that part of the woods again. And the scariest part was a week after the incident, someone went missing in those woods, last seen hiking near that same spot we were at. I mean, you can never say for sure that the two incidents are related, but something still gives me an eerie feeling that they were